If you're looking for a fun DIY Christmas decor project, I have the perfect one for you. I built this beautiful gingerbread Christmas village from inexpensive MDF board, and it was so easy to build, but so much fun to decorate. Let me show you how. I started by laying down a piece of rigid foam on my work table to use as my sacrificial cut board. This will fully support the small cuts needed for those little houses. I measured out the strips on the board according to the diagram in the plans. I'll make sure to put a link to the plans in the description below. I used my Craig AccuCut saw guide with a circular saw to cut strips off the MDF sheet. Then I cross-cut the strips into the finished pieces. I used a scrap piece to support the back of the AccuCut on these short pieces when I made the cut. For the angled cuts, I measured those out and marked them. Again, I used the AccuCut to cut them. The foam board on the bottom and the anti-slip strip on the guide help to keep the small pieces from moving around when cutting. For the front of the wider house, I used a jigsaw to cut out the shape since it is not just a straight line. Next, I marked out where the windows and doors would go on the front pieces. Instead of cutting out the small round windows with a jigsaw, I used a drill with a Forstner bit to cut them out. Then I used the jigsaw to cut out the doors and remaining windows. I always use a scroll cut blade in my jigsaw when making smaller detailed cuts, and it worked great being able to cut these tight curves in the MDF. For the windows, I drilled a hole in the center to allow me to get the blade inside, then did lots of detailed cuts to the corners to clear out the shape. Cutting all the pieces and the small details is what took the longest time on this build. Once everything was cut out, it was time to assemble. I used super glue gel to glue them together so it would be faster. I started with a smaller house and glued the sides to the back and front. I thought it would only have to be held for a couple seconds, but it ended up being more about a minute to get the glue to hold it in place. So when I glued the roof on, I decided to use painter's tape as a clamp to hold them so I didn't have to wait for the glue to dry before I could move on, and it worked great. For the next two houses, I was able to glue them together quickly using the painter's tape to hold things in place as I went. With the tape, you could use wood glue instead of super glue, but then you might want to let the houses dry fully overnight before moving on, and sometimes I'm just impatient. With the wider house, the roof has an additional gable on the front. These two pieces do not fit perfectly against the roof because I didn't want to figure out all the angles to make that work, and they are supposed to be cookies. So I got the size close and then glued them in place. Once the glue was dried, I removed the painter's tape and sanded the houses. I used my orbital sander and curved over the top edges of the pieces to make them look like cookies that puffed up a bit in the oven. Then I spray painted them to look like gingerbread. I used a combination of warm caramel and nutmeg paints by Rust-Oleum. Don't you think that was perfectly named for this project? And once the paint was dry, the fun really started. I used white puff paint to add the frosting decorations. You can also use it for the seams to make it look like the frosting was used to assemble them. Also, it was perfect for filling in any gaps. For the roof, I did draw some pencil lines to try to follow to help them stay straight, but my hand was not super steady because I couldn't rest it on anything without accidentally smearing the paint. This was the hardest part of the whole thing, but I got the hang of it after a few minutes and had a lot of fun decorating my gingerbread houses. Now, one thing to note when decorating with the puff paint is you do want to let it dry for 12 hours before accidentally touching it. So I've only decorated the tops and the front of my gingerbread houses so far, and now I get to go back and start decorating the sides. It'll be great because I can keep adding to these throughout the season when I have some free time. And I can make them as fun as I want to continue to use them for decorations for years to come. Please hit the like button if you like this video, and make sure to follow along on housefulofhandmade.com for even more fun things to build to decorate your home.